Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the Two Matts podcast, brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
Great people.
Great people.
The greatest.
By far the greatest.
By far the greatest.
Some say. If you're not, you should join them, but more of that anon.
Yeah.
It's been a hell of a week in the world of social media and tech, hasn't it?
It has, and it shows that really siloing the world of tech is no longer possible. The world of tech is now the world, and it intrudes on politics in a very big way. And the start this week, after Elon Musk being very much leading the kind of charge, it was Mark Zuckerberg, the founder and CEO of Meta, who announced what can only be described as a sort of screeching U-turn in policy on Tuesday. Should we have a quick blast of him?
Yeah.
Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system.
The tone of it was extraordinary for a start. Let's get over the aesthetics. I mean, he did look like someone had a gun pointed at his head.
There was a bit of a hostage video feel to it, and I still, can't get over the fact that a man who used to look like an albino HP pencil has now sort of restyled himself as a sort of MMA fighter.
He does Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
He does,
He's very hench these days.
Surfer hair and a rapper's gold chain.
A very regressive perm.
Ill-advised perm.
But not as regressive as his announcement.
And to complete the suite, a $900,000 watch. A drug dealer might wear.
I saw that detail, and funnily enough, that was the least of my concerns.
That is not.
In fact, I was quite surprised it was that cheap. Whose wrist it was on.
You cheapskate, Zuckerberg.
Exactly.
Anyway, so what is he doing? It's a lot, and I think we'll agree on most of it. So what we can probably do is sort of talk about what we agree on, and then maybe, just for the sake of argument, I might steel man some of Zuckerberg's arguments just to have an argument.
Explain that phrase, steel man.
Okay, steel man. It's the opposite of straw man. In other words, let's pretend that our opponent's argument, if we had to pretend that our opponent's arguments were valid. Yeah. What's the best we could do?
How would you prosecute them as a almost as a lawyer?
And it's a useful exercise often if, as in this case, you have a very strong, as I think we both did, visceral response to it. So what is he doing? It's a very big deal. He is ditching Meta's. For people who don't know, Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and smaller but still important Threads, the sort of competitor to X. And the numbers in this, just to give an idea of scale, because it is important. Facebook has 3 billion users.
That's half the population of the planet.
Instagram has 2.4 billion users. WhatsApp has 2 billion users, and Threads has 275 million. And just to give it an idea of scale, because we've been talking about X a lot recently, X has only 600 million. So that gives you an idea of why what Zuckerberg says is very important to the information flow around the world.
And let me just interject there, because I think there's a very interesting point about the disproportionate airtime X gets versus Facebook and Instagram.
Very, very important.
Part of the reason is journalists are obsessed with X.
Right, and I think that is part of the story to tell.
Yeah.
So what's he doing? He's ditching Meta's 9-year relationship with a network of fact checkers, right? No more fact checkers. He's adopting the model that Elon Musk has used at X, Community Notes, which is basically you sign up as a user on X to be, it's a little bit sort of dark version of Wikipedia, I guess, to be an editor on posts on X, and if a certain critical mass is reached of complaints about a post, and crucial caveat, there's a diversity of opinion. They come from different, it gets a bit opaque here.
And it takes a very long time.
And it does. But that's the model. So what will now appear more often is that instead of things being fact-checked, well, they won't be fact-checked, if people see something on Facebook that they think is wrong, there'll be an opportunity for them, sort of wisdom of crowd style, to register there.
And we should also make the other very important distinction, which is that, yes, there may be a community note against something, but the original post, which the community note is correcting, will stay in place.
Yes.
And someone will have to take the effort to click on the community note and read it.
That's correct. So the other things he's doing, he's moving the content moderators, who will remain in place, from California to Texas, which is a real culture war move. What he's saying is, I mean, he didn't really disguise anything in this in this little clip. His feeling is that California is liberal and Texas is the home of Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, and that side of the MAGA coalition, and it's symbolic to the point of crassness, really. And the other thing he said is there'll be more political content. Now, what is he still going to keep off? He said he wants more free speech, but he will continue to have systems to tackle what he calls illegal and high severity violations like terrorism, child sexual exploitation, drugs, frauds and scams. For less severe policy violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take any action. So that means if you're a user and you see something you don't like, you have to flag it up. And he's promised that they'll continue to act against things that encourage suicidal ideation, self-harm, and all that sort of thing. But it's still very murky. I think at the top, it's worth mentioning in this sort of context that he did two other things which are very significant. Nick Clegg, who'd been his sort of head of policy, has left the company. And Joel Kaplan, who's a Republican apparatchik, he was deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush, has replaced him and went on Fox and Friends to talk about the new regime. And Zuckerberg has brought onto the board of Meta that well-known journalist and expert in the information economy, Dana White, the founder of the UFC.
Amazing.
And a close friend of Trump's. So that's where we are.
And there's another aspect which we'll get into, I'm sure, which is his direct plea, the bizarre direct plea for help from Donald Trump in dealing with troublesome, awkward foreign countries like us and Europe.
Absolutely. I thought it was fascinating that he really did say the quiet part out loud. So what lies behind this? And I think you and I'd probably immediately agree that it's power and profit. Although he's saying it's all to do with free speech.
I mean, contextualize Zuckerberg's journey, because remember 4 years ago Zuckerberg kicked Trump off Facebook.
Right. I mean, he is a reed in the wind. He's an opportunist par excellence, and it's served him very well.
So I was speaking to somebody about a totally different topic yesterday by absolute coincidence, who used to work within the Facebook hierarchy, worked with Zuckerberg, and had finally come to the decision that they could no longer work there because, quotes, the man has no moral compass whatsoever.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that he is he does things that will advantage him and his company. I also think that it's no accident that Elon Musk has really been one of the dominant global forces in public life in the last few months. And I suspect for Zuckerberg, this must be intolerable, because he founded Facebook in 2004. Musk has only been in the social media game since 2022 when he bought Twitter and turned it into X. So he must be thinking, this is hang on a minute, Musk is somehow vice president in all but name, and I'm allowed dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
I think it's worth remembering how Facebook started as well, because it touches on. I find it absolutely fascinating that these guys sit there now today as still young men, but as though they are some sort of representatives of a higher morality. And that there is a deep core of altruism running through them, and that all they are trying to do is to seek to improve society. When we all know that is absolute bullshit. But remember how Facebook started. Facebook was an app, the Facebook, to grade the beauty of college students at Harvard University.
Yes.
Is she hot? Is she not hot?
Absolutely.
That's what Zuckerberg is in his deep DNA. That's the guy we're dealing with.
That's true. But I mean, and we can come on to this later, perhaps at greater length. I think one of the problems in all of this is that we and governments never took them seriously enough, these people. You know, we thought that social media was initially fun, but and it might be a bit nasty occasionally, but that it was really just this thing.
Yeah.
And when we could have been regulating it and reining it in and subjecting it, I mean, to give you an example, Chris Hughes, who was one of the founders of Facebook, wrote a quite famous piece in the New York Times as far back as 2019 saying we've got to break up Facebook. It's getting too powerful. But we didn't. And here we are. And, you know, it's no surprise that these very dysfunctional men who are tech geniuses, one has to allow them that, or have used the knowledge and prowess of other tech geniuses, have taken as much power as is available to them.
I'd push back slightly on the tech genius element. I think that these are guys who, in the same way at the breakup of the Soviet Union, people jumped on the opportunity and seized and became oligarchs. But hang on, let me finish the thought. These guys had a great idea, technological idea, and there was a land grab, which they were very successful at. Where I'd push back at is the assumption would be these guys are pure tech innovators and they're always searching for new things and new ways to engage. But what we're seeing here now is actually a kind of sclerotic approach to their business, which is we've run out of ideas. What we're going to do is we're going to buy and influence and use politics and politicians. They ate the media a long time ago. Now they're eating politics.
Well, hold on a second. I mean, Meta is 109 billion in profit.
Yeah, but so what?
I just.
But it's practically had a monopoly of social media for a long time.
Right, but I mean, my point is that whether or not that was a reflection of tech genius, they did it, didn't they?
They did do it, but what I'm saying is now they've run out of ideas now.
Well, I don't know about that either, you see, because, I mean, both of them are very heavily in the AI game.
Yeah, but Zuckerberg's AI effort is a joke.
Yeah, so far. I mean, all I'm saying is that I think that I'm not sure the word sclerotic applied to these companies is will weather well.
Well, I think what we're seeing, my optimistic take on because I mean I watched the Zuckerberg thing, and I don't think I've felt as depressed by a single piece of news as I have done since the Brexit vote, to be honest, because I just thought, my God, this is existentially terrible, right?
Yeah.
But then I did do a lot of reading around. I read a brilliant piece in the New York Times yesterday by, I forget the woman's name, it'll come to me. But she was saying what we're seeing here is an indication that they've run out of the ability to innovate, that they're now leveraging politics or the behest of politics. They're buying their way into success. What we'll see is more disruptive innovation coming underneath these guys. And I think there's a great case to be made for that.
Well, yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
Because this is not a state of status.
No, of course not. But one of the reasons that they've been clustering around Mar-a-Lago is because they want a regulatory environment that keeps out new startups.
Exactly. But
but
it was ever thus, though.
It was, but then they still win.
Well, if what you're describing is that you think that we are now at a kind of apex of influence and money that is insurmountable by innovation, I don't agree with that.
I don't think it's insurmountable, but I think we're in a very dangerous place.
There's no doubt about that.
And I wouldn't rely on what you call sclerosis to be disrupted by a new wave of startups, because one of the things that happens, of course, and is happening all the time, and people like Mike Anderson, the VC capitalist who's a great friend of Musk, enable, is that the big companies buy up the new startups and absorb them. I mean, that's how Google has grown so big. It's just it buys up, it buys up. So anyway, well, going back to Zuckerberg's kind of change of heart, if that's the right thing. This goes back to July when in Butler, Trump was nearly assassinated.
Yeah.
And Zuckerberg came out and said it was the most, when Trump raised his fist and said, fight, fight, fight. Zuckerberg suddenly said it's one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. And that was the poker player tell, which was he was going to go all in. And he was already grumbling about what had happened during the Biden administration to Facebook, which we're going to talk about later. But I think what's interesting, and you raised it earlier, Matt, is that he explicitly said in this statement that he wants Trump's help in pressuring foreign governments, the EU, the UK, elsewhere, China, Brazil, to basically surrender to the conditions that Facebook wants. And I think this is very dangerous.
Because the current situation is that there's legislation in Europe that if Facebook did what they're proposing to do in the United States, would open them up to a potential fine of 6% of their global revenues,
that's right.
which is fucking enormous.
It is enormous, absolutely. So,
and Zuckerberg obviously doesn't quite know how to deal with that, but he's saying to Trump, look, put them under the pressure of tariffs. This is all about free speech. This is because the other thing we haven't mentioned is that Zuckerberg's business model just got a hell of a lot cheaper.
Yes,
when he doesn't have to employ the
$5 billion,
billions of
$5 billion,
yeah, exactly,
$5 billion saving.
So he's saying to Trump, let me put them under pressure. The tariffs, all the stuff about who knows how intertwined all of this talk is, Greenland and everything else, so that we can do it under the mandate of free speech. But please get those dogs off my back.
Yeah. Well, and as of today, because Trump is nothing if not fickle and capricious, he is rooting for them. You know, he's pleased that Zuckerberg has kissed the ring. He said in his press conference that it was, he agreed with the assertion that it was because he's threatened in the past to put Zuckerberg in jail for various infractions, and he agreed that it was in response to these threats that Zuckerberg.
But that was an extraordinary thing.
It was, wasn't it?
I mean, there's no other politician, maybe Lukashenko or Putin or someone like this. There's no other politician who would be so brazen to answer the question, is this because you threatened to put him in jail that he's done this? Probably.
It's entirely transactional. So, I mean, the thing I think that at the heart of darkness of all this, the thing that is indefensible, I can't steal man, right? Is getting rid of the fact-checking.
Yeah.
Because, and I was interested digging around in Meta's own pages. I mean, the claim has been that they've been inundated with complaints about, fact checking. Well, actually, they did their own survey, which found that 63% of their users thought they were being applied just dandily, right?
Amazing.
So obviously they just decided to ignore that.
The guy from Full Fact, who it was outsourced to them to run the fact checking operation. And he said it's absolute nonsense. He said, there's loads of conservative fact checkers, left-wing fact checkers. There's a whole gamut.
It's a right-wing talking point that fact checkers are all communists and workerati. This is just not true. I mean, the fact-checking cottage industry that's arisen since 2016 is now very, very diverse and in some cases extremely impressive. Yeah. And they had got together, Meta, a sort of coalition which were certified through the non-partisan International Fact-Checking Network, right? So it was all kosher. They just don't want it anymore. So really, it's a shame. I mean, what it is a shameless moment in the history of tech and power.
What do you think will be the real net effect of this? Then?
Oh, I think it will be considerable.
Yeah.
Let me explain some of the. Let me do the steel man thing, and please bear in mind, listeners, that this is not what I think, but this is what I think Zuckerberg would say if he was here. Right? Okay. So his argument, and the argument of a lot of people in tech, and not just the mega tech people, but Silicon Valley generally, is that what you've seen in the last 4 years has amounted to overreach in regulation. And the problem is that they have a limited point, which is when Musk bought X, he allowed a bunch of journalists to come in and rummage around the files, and this became a story called the Twitter files, and it did reveal, there's no question about it, and Zuckerberg confirmed similar things going on at Facebook, that FBI and other government officials had pressured these platforms to demote, and this is the really important thing, that they weren't saying ban it, but there was demote stories about Hunter Biden's laptop, which you'll recall was a story of great controversy about what was on it. Did it show links to Ukraine, Biden's interests abroad, and so on, in the run-up to the 2020 election. And this is a very big deal, and not just for MAGA, but for Republican voters generally in the EU. So the second big area was COVID. So there was similar pressure brought to bear on Meta and other networks during the pandemic over claims that actually were quite reasonable. I'm not talking here about take ivermectin, it's great. I'm talking about maybe the virus came out of Wuhan labs, right? Which is now not proven, but a quite respectable point of view.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the one that really drives people up the wall was that around the time of the vaccines, it was claimed as a matter of absolutely indubitable fact that the vaccines prevented transmission. And people said on social media, I'm not sure that's true. And they were deplatformed, banned. And so you've got this sort of backdrop. And two other things. One was after January the 6th, there was, and I thought at the time, this is a mistake, a huge, it was called the Great Deplatforming. So anyone who was right of centre faced either being shadow banned, which means that you're still on, but you're not really prominent and therefore you don't exist, or demonetized, or being kicked off the platforms completely. And it did lead to some really bad outcomes. Like, you and I saw Ben Shapiro at the Jordan Peterson show right now. I think we can agree that he's not our cup of tea, right? But he's not a Nazi, right?
No, not at all.
He's a conservative.
Yeah,
okay?
and he should be listened to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And his page before this happened was the number 1 page on Facebook.
Yeah.
He got 1 billion hits a month.
Wow.
1 billion. And after this sort of arbitrary decision, it went down to 100,000.
Amazing.
And the Daily Wire had to completely rejig its business model. And what happened was that there was this sort of view that the way to defeat ideas was to ban them. And I think if nothing else, the last 4 years have shown that that's not true.
And you and I have had, and we'll probably come back in part 2 to talk about what's the response to all of this, but we've had conversations about this idea that we have to work harder than just saying this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is good. We can't carry on like that.
I mean, one of the reasons that we've talked often that very unpleasant Trump ad that said, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. Yeah. Why was that so effective? Well, one of the reasons was that, and I had this myself, you were sin binned or put in Facebook jail. I don't really do Facebook, but if you said that biological sex was real for a while.
Right.
And at the time, people said, I understand where you're coming from, but it's hate speech.
Yeah.
It makes people feel unsafe. And that, I think, all I'm really doing is explaining the broader context.
But let's just put the spotlight on this moment, because this is exactly the kind of moment we described earlier in another podcast about where suddenly we're uncomfortable, aren't we? We're both now kind of uncomfortable about how explicit can we be about why that is a bad situation.
And I think that one of the sort of exercises and sort of affirmations in the mirror in the morning we're going to have to do is learning not to be quite so squeamish.
And I think that the discomfort, I can only speak for myself, the discomfort comes from cowardice is too strong, but an awareness that saying the wrong thing, even if you're trying to get to the right place, the consequences of saying the wrong thing can be so absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah, but I think that was, for me, the gender argument was where the rubber hit the road.
And you got over that.
Well, because I thought if it's got to the point where saying that biological sex is real is literally grounds for being taken off a platform, then we're in bad trouble. I don't think trans people are helped by this at all.
No, of course.
And B, 99.99% of people think that biological sex is
Yeah.
real.
And
And up until 10 minutes ago, 100% of people
And by
thought
the
that
way,
biological sex is real.
Mate, I mean, I've got total respect for trans people fighting
Yes.
their corner, but it's the other people who use their argument for
Yes, and also-
as a something to beat people up with for a whole range of
Sure,
reasons.
and also, there's another group of people called women who account for 51% of who have fairly strong views on this.
Yeah.
So just to complete the kind of steel manning exercise, deep breath. I mean, we talk about misinformation, disinformation coming from the right. In America, and don't forget, Zuckerberg and Musk are, for all their imperial ambitions, quintessentially hypermodern Americans.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, the biggest disinformation campaign of the last few years has been the idea that Biden was fit for office.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Americans,
So true.
when they hear disinformation, they think of White House press secretaries saying that's cheap fake.
Yeah.
Right? So
And it's become obvious now that that Biden has been unfit for a long time.
for a long time. The Wall Street Journal did a very good,
They did.
very even-handed, but well-reported, making it clear that as early as 2021, he was in, trouble.
Yeah.
So the problem is that when we hear Zuckerberg talking about a cultural inflection point and free speech, we think, he means letting lots of right-wingers back on, right? But a lot of Americans will have heard, I'm fed up of not being able to say that men can't become women.
Yeah.
And I'm sick and tired of hearing that Biden could have gone for a second term, and reading over the Christmas period, by the way, that Biden's allies are saying that he could have won.
Yeah. So is that, put Zuckerberg and Meta and Musk to one side for the moment, the feeling about the people who use these platforms, do you think that there's a pendulum swinging back from a too far correction where people have had to stick up their backs about what they feel they can say, and now people are saying, well, actually,
as you know, I never agree with the pendulum theory of anything. No, I think we're just moving into a new era. And I think that certainly as far as America is concerned, there is now a sort of... There is a desire for the straitjacket of what they see as democratic elite thinking to be released. Now, the point that you started off by making is kind of the point for us, which is, okay, that's America. And in a way, that's their business in a way. But I'm extremely unhappy at the idea that Zuckerberg and Musk will be weaponizing the power of American diplomacy and economic strategy to get their own way in the EU and the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we decide our own policy.
Let's take a very brief pause there. I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes. Before we go, I want to hammer home the only important message and the absolutely factual message that subscribing to the New European makes your life better and happier.
This has been fact-checked.
This has been fact-checked by Meta fact-checkers before on their way out of the door.
Before they left.
And you'll get...
They left a little note.
And by the way, just to sweeten the pill, you'll get a free bottle of El Rayo tequila when you subscribe.
Fact-checked.
So, I mean, by the time you finish with that, you won't care whether it's true or not.
Yeah, you'll just
be in a very happy, pleasant,
fake
warm
news,
place.
alternative facts.
Give me another shot of tequila. So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. There's a link in the show notes. We'll see you in a minute.
See you in a minute.
What can an object tell us about the conflicts that have shaped our world? Conflict of Interest is the podcast that invites celebrity guests to Imperial War Museum London for a carefully curated tour of our most revealing artefacts. Join Keris Matthews, Phil Wang, Eddie Izzard, Jamali Maddox, Kerry Mulligan and more as they get to grips with the history of Afghanistan, the Malayan Emergency or the Vietnam War. That's Conflict of Interest from Imperial War Museums. Series 3 out now.
Welcome back, dear listeners. We're talking about
Tech maniacs.
Tech maniacs. There was a great tweet this morning. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon from Andy Murray. I can't do an Andy. I'll try. But he said,
do a Andy Murray.
He said, I noticed that. I can't know. It's turning into
You think
shortcoming. He said that the top 14 stories of his Twitter feed were all by Elon Musk.
Yes.
Then he said some algorithm he's created.
Yeah,
no, this is another point.
It is fair to point out that I think that, however, I think that that's the point, really. He raises the point, which is more important than fact checking and content moderation is the algorithm. Mm-hmm. It gives you more of what you want, and in Elon's case, it gives us more Elon.
Yeah.
So what's he been up to? A lot is the answer. Today, Thursday, the FT, which doesn't take flyers, to put it mildly, is reporting that he Musk wants to overthrow Starmer before the next election. Now, the means of overthrow remain unclear, but nonetheless, it seems to me a matter for some concern.
Marginally less concerning than what I read in the Sunday Sport over the weekend, which is that Elon Musk wants to buy Liverpool Football Club.
Yes, and not just the sport. I think there's a measure of truth.
Well, here's the thing that I find depressing, and most people think this is nonsense, but I think there is a serious point there. There are loads of Liverpool fans on Twitter right now going, that would be fantastic, the richest man in the world owning our football club.
Yes.
I mean, the amount to which money talks in this world is a problem.
I was speaking just before Christmas to a very famous actor at a carol concert, and I said jokingly, maybe Musk will buy up one of the great cultural institutions of the UK, and I could see him momentarily thinking that'd be great.
Yeah, imagine
just $100 million instantly, problem over, no more Arts Council, and you're right. But what's interesting is that he might buy Liverpool. I hope he doesn't.
I don't think he will. I'll have to get the tattoo removed.
Well,
Actually, some things are even bigger than Elon fucking Musk, and Liverpool Football Club is one of them.
Well, I defer to you on that one, as on all things. But I think he's too obsessed. I think he's got the political bug, right? Yeah. So as well as overthrowing the UK government, he's tonight, Thursday, interviewing the AFD's leader, Alice Weidel, on X.
I've seen. Well, do you know how I know that? Because I've seen repeated adverts for it all over my Twitter feed.
Yes, of course you have. Yeah, because amazing. It is a one-man megalomaniacal platform. Yeah. And I was thinking on the way here actually that there's a huge irony in all this, because leaving aside Trump's, I want to buy Greenland and Denmark and possibly rename the Gulf of Mexico and all that. The general trend in American foreign policy is to withdraw from, foreign entanglements.
Yeah, being the world's policeman.
Right. But Trump's main buddy, Elon Musk, is sort of undertaking what can only be described as a digital imperialist strategy.
Social invasions.
He's going virtual invasions. He's going around the world seeing who he wants to be heads of state and heads of government and just making and there's this is deranged behavior. But it is having massive real world consequences. So we talked a bit on Monday about this, but in Starmer's, I think, very good response to Musk's appalling statements about Jess Phillips and others,
which we should say he has continued unabated.
Oh, I mean, with total lack of contrition or anything. Well, not contrition, just carried on, and it has been depressing, as you said on Monday, Matt, that to watch the Tories just jump on this. Yeah. So last night, Wednesday, MPs voted down Kemi Badenoch's call for a new probe into the scandal, the grooming gang scandal, and this was if it had been passed, there was no question it was going to be passed. It was 364 to 111, so she didn't even get all her own MPs. Yeah. But it was to wreck an entire education bill, which is quite a thing.
Yeah, and the way that plays out is that some prat from GB News reports this, saying, "Can you believe they've voted down a full inquiry?" And Elon Musk retweets that, saying, "Wow, unbelievable." I mean, Elon Musk also tweeted the other day that hundreds of thousands of little girls are being raped in Britain and have been raped. Now, the figure is bad enough, right? The figure is 1,400 according to the J report, which took 7 years fact-checking itself, right?
Came out in 2022.
Yeah, but this guy with his 220 million followers just says hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
are being raped. Now, that will be the worldview of quite a lot of people in the
It
UK
will.
right now. And certainly a lot of people who don't care that much either way, you know.
I was very interested. The Spectator has a piece today by Douglas Murray, who is no
Friend of the show.
but also no left liberal,
No.
to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And I was very interested that Douglas said there's no need for another inquiry.
Yeah.
You know, which shows that people on, you know, and for listeners who aren't familiar with Douglas Murray's work, I mean, his book on the strange death of Europe sort of launched this whole idea that we're being invaded by Muslims and so on. So
Yeah.
if he says we don't need a new inquiry, that shows you the level of Musk's detachment from reality.
Well, isn't this the whole bloody point? Is that all of these things are grounded in so much ignorance, but they have so much consequence. PMQs yesterday, Starmer sits there and outlines what would be the net result of a public inquiry. We wouldn't get any results back until the 2030s.
It would be
years and years and years. And there's loads of stuff we should be doing, which the Tory government never bothered its arse
the
to do.
survivors would be, by then, in many cases, in middle age.
Listen,
you know.
I've followed the Hillsborough inquiry.
Right, which went on forever.
It went on half of my life.
No,
It went
of
on
course.
25 years.
It's a outrageous strategy. This, I mean, what needs to be done is, and you know, it's an obvious point, but those recommendations that have been made by the multiple inquiries need to be implemented post haste, and that's the point. And yet, and here is, I suppose, where we are in the predicament we're in. We are all talking about bloody Elon Musk and a public inquiry that is not needed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are reasons why that has happened, why we've reached it, but I do think part of it is to go back to a point you made earlier, Matt, about having to think very unwelcome thoughts. And one of them is that we are used, and we as individual journalists grew up in a world in which news platforms were essentially institutions, and they were run by a sort of credentialism. You had to learn your trade somehow, and you had to earn your position of authority as a journalist. We now live in and that was mimicked in all sorts of institutional settings. That was we lived in a world of institutions. We now live in a world of networks, where credentialism, what you've done in the past, is irrelevant. It's all about power. It's all about money. And what worries me enormously is that, this makes the robber barons of the Gilded Age look like corner shop owners.
Yeah, exactly.
The power that these individuals, and then, by the way, it's not, Musk and Zuckerberg are the most lurid examples, but there's Bezos, there's Apple, there are all the slightly less front of house theatrical individuals, a group that probably amounts to no more than 20, it's all men, by the way, men who are trying to contrive to run the world, and no more, no less. And I wish I had a sort of glib answer to how to deal with this, because the problem is that they've got a 20-year head start on us.
And one of the big problems in terms of media, which is basically what we're talking about, media. And remember what media means. We are the transmitters of content to people. We are the medium. And that period of time you were describing about earning authority within an organisation, a publishing organisation or a broadcast organisation, one of the things was you were surrounded by so many layers of fact checkers, right? Of people
who be called sub-editors
or editors or the news editors, people who would steer you in the right direction in the first place, people who would monitor your output, people who would correct your output, people who, literally to this day, to their credit, the New York Times still has a fact-checking department.
As does the BBC.
And I've been at the sharp end of that, where they wrote about the launch of the New European. First time ever, I gave loads of interviews about that. The only organisation who phoned up with a separate person to the reporter, saying, I want to check these details. You said you had the idea in Red Church Street. I can't find it on Google Maps. I was astonished by the level of detail.
I've written pieces for the New York Times and the Washington Post in my time, and to be fair to both of them, exactly that. You get you file what you think is, and you get phoned up by people who say, hang on a minute, was that in 20?
Yeah.
They're not saying it didn't, but they can't find a reference.
Right. I mean, but the absolute rigor of
Yes.
it, which now, I 30 years ago would have been standard in many news organizations,
Yes.
and now is an oddity when you come across it. But the reason that rigor existed was because of the ambition to be accurate. Right?
Yes.
The reason that rigor no longer exists in many of the newspapers and broadcasters we work and experience
Can't afford it.
is because they can't afford it, because social media
Yes.
undercut their business models
Right.
and ripped
Right.
the advertising out of them. Craigslist decimated the local advertising
Yep.
market. That's why local newspapers are basically a done business, right? It's because of Craigslist. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and the rest of it, they have displaced the media in terms of where people
Yes.
get their news from. It's a fact that X is now the most used news source on the planet.
I mean, one of the problems with all of this, to sort of step back all the way, is that I don't think, and how could we, I don't think any of us really thought through what the internet was. That connecting everyone all at once through, and once broadband and mobile phones were in place, smartphones, you really were connecting everyone, has created an information economy which just dwarfs anything there's ever been, ever.
Yeah.
And the problem is that the scale of it is almost beyond imagination, let alone government reach.
Exactly.
And I don't have a glib answer to it. I mean, I think that, and these are small, because I think it will be incremental. But I would like, I mean, you mentioned last time that you'd like to see Jess Phillips take Musk to court. And I agree with that. I think that one of the things that, Starmer was great in August because he said, right, there are legal consequences to all these tweets which are inciting violence. That was great.
Yeah.
And even if there's no chance of a prosecution for malicious communication, I'm sure that there is a civil suit that Jess Phillips
100%.
could raise about, and we know from the very moving interview she gave this week, that to Victoria Derbyshire, that, she is living now under, she couldn't elaborate
It's
for
an
obvious
absolute
reasons.
outrage.
Heightened security.
Yeah.
There are real life consequences
And
for
by
this.
the way, he's got form for it, of course, because the Thai diver, do you remember there was the British Thai diver that went to rescue those guys trapped under the cave,
whom he called a pedo for some reason. Yeah.
He sued Musk, so it can be done.
It can be done, and I think that it's important never to underestimate the majesty of English law in the eyes of Americans, and B, that he would be genuinely. I think Musk would be taken aback by that. He would, and he would come and he would try and demonstrate he was in the right, and that would be a good test case.
It must have occurred to Jess Phillips that to do that, and I suspect that it must have been if I can't speak on her behalf and tell her what I think she should do, but if she had thought maybe this is something that I should do, I bet you the politics slapped it down and said, don't do that.
Yes, and that, and also I think that when you're in the eye of a storm and you're facing threats of violence to you and your family, you do, because it's a natural human instinct, balk at any form of escalation. Yeah, and I mean she's a tough and excellent person, Jess Phillips,
That's
and
right.
I salute her, and I'm sorry. And if you're listening, Jess, we're
full square behind
we
you,
are on your side.
Yeah, for what it's worth.
For what it's worth, you're a great woman. But I mean, I can understand why she wouldn't want to take it any further. But I do think that that's the thing. And the other thing, which is a lesser thing, it feels weak in comparison, but I do feel that just relying on statecraft to rein these buggers in is not something that's going to be on the table for the medium term. And I think that the emphasis we should be really pouring money into and efforts in all across the board is making people, to use the Nassim Nicholas Taleb form, anti-fragile about how they cope with social media, and B, massively upgrade children's and indeed adults' media literacy. Because what we need is for people, in a way, not. I mean, in this country, why do we care so much about Elon Musk? I mean, he doesn't have a great range of contracts with the government here.
That's right.
As far as we're concerned, he's a private citizen who has a bungalow in Mar-a-Lago, takes a lot of ketamine,
Yeah.
and is deranged.
Yeah.
And that's it.
But then he finds himself the splash in the Daily Telegraph,
Yes, and
the lead in the Mail.
Of course.
Because as ever, there's a circular kind of exploitation of all of the worst of us by people trying to beat. It's like a circle of men beating themselves on the head with a stick behind each other.
Yeah, and
it just goes round and round and round.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I can only be honest on behalf. It's a while since I've been news editing, but richest man in the world, Biff's prime minister, is a good story.
Yeah.
There's no way around that.
Yeah.
And this is the problem: is that when you're designing a front page, your first thought isn't always what's the health of the polity.
Yeah.
You think what's a great
what's going to
tale?
Sell? Yeah, no.
What's a great yarn? And it is a great. This is the difficult point about this is that it is a very interesting, hyper contemporary story of our times.
It is.
It is, and I think it's going to. One of the things I think about Trump's second presidency is that this is going to be a really big part of it. It wasn't in the first presidency. I mean, Musk was not on side. No. In fact, Zuckerberg was being blamed, if you recall, for the alleged Russian intervention, and all of that. This is different. Yeah. It's really different.
Yeah, and I can't wait for the fallout as well, which is coming down the train lines with an inevitability. That must. I read a tweet somewhere saying that Trump had said to somebody, Musk is around too much.
Yeah.
And that's going to build and build and build.
I mean, the one thing you can always reassure yourself about the court of Donald Trump is that it is never a happy ship.
Yeah.
And all this, I'm hearing a lot of, he's changed. He's changed since the assassination. No, he hasn't. I mean, watch that press conference he gave at Mar-a-Lago. He's still up to his old tricks, trolling everyone. And I think he will hate all this, actually, because Musk is now acting as his plenipotentiary around the world.
Yeah.
Trump doesn't want to be seen supporting the AfD.
Yeah.
Or Tommy Robinson.
Trump's never bloody heard of Jess Phillips. It's kind of like, why am I suddenly going to war with the UK over this woman I've never heard of?
Trump wants to deport everyone and arguably buy Greenland and some other things and have loads of tax cuts.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be bothered with Jess Phillips.
Yeah. Maybe the objective idiocy of so much of Musk's output will be what actually, in a calmer way, leads to his downfall, because people will be saying to, Mandelson will be saying to his counterparts in Washington, look, this guy's just talking absolute bollocks. Those people will whisper in Trump's ear, Donald, Mr. President, this is all bollocks, but he's causing major embarrassment.
You see, I think that one of the things that, and I do hear this a bit in Whitehall, and I think it's absolutely wrong, is we mustn't upset Musk too much because he's close to Trump. No, I think the opposite. I think that the clever diplomacy is a bit like what you just said, which is to say, let it be known to Trump that Musk is humiliating him abroad.
Exactly right.
He is making him look like an idiot.
Exactly
right.
I
don't know how loyal Trump is to Farage, a bit, right? But Musk unilaterally just indicated that MAGA no longer likes Farage.
Because you can bet your life there's no way he ran that past Donald Trump.
Well, I think we really are at the bone now. I don't believe that any of this is being run past Donald Trump, but I think that Musk in his head, in that strange place that is Elon Musk's head, Christ alive, thinks that he is so important and so useful to Trump that when he says it, Trump will automatically sign up to it. And this is a grave misreading of recent history. I mean, never forget, Steve Bannon was Trump's chief strategist, and he was doomed by a single Time magazine cover which said, is this the second most powerful man in the world, I think, or America? Yeah. And apparently Trump saw it and just said, you've got to be kidding. And that was just a Time cover.
Yeah.
Now, this is effectively global diplomacy done via tweet. So I think that on that front, in fact, I think Zuckerberg is the one to keep an eye on. I think Musk may implode, but Zuckerberg is very powerful.
and it's going to go on and on.
Oh, this
and
is
on.
going to be a huge theme.
We write about this stuff every week in the pages of the New European and on our fabulous new website. Check out the website. Just if you may not have ever visited the website, go to theneweuropean.co.uk and see what we're all about. You can subscribe from a little more than £1 a week. So if you don't think that's good value, then I would commend yourselves to give your heads a wobble. It's great value. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats to subscribe. And if you do it quickly enough, you'll get a full big bottle of fantastic El Rayo tequila sent to you free as a welcome gift. That's
From
not
the
bad, is
Gulf
it?
of America.
From the Gulf of America. Thank you so much. Send in any questions, please. We've got our Sunday Q&A dropping on Sunday. And the email for questions is 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.com. Thank you to our production team at Rethink Audio, led by Mr. Matt Hill. And until Sunday,
It's goodbye from me.
it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.